All right, something Pastor Shell touched on, and I want to kind of amplify on it. He talked about getting wisdom for the field you go to, and how much of that is available to us. Really, um, there's a there is a principle in in the work of God in the tabernacle in Numbers chapter 4, where every part of the tabernacle was covered um, by there was a cloth that went on every single part of the ministry, and that's a great picture for us of the value um, of coverings in the ministry, and God has given us many. So I'm going to just share three things as we wrap up here. The first one is spiritual wisdom. In all you're getting, get wisdom. And this is maybe if we could give like in the practical side of missions. Um, uh, that that Paul said God has given us authority for your edification, and one of the most important things that someone can really utilize, and one of the most important provisions that God gives a missionary is His covering. Um, really godly, spiritual authority, whether it's on what team to go to, like that young lady asked, that I have a covering in my sending church that I can get advice from. Do you think this is a good place to go to? Um, and then also the person that I'm going to, whether it's a new team or an established work, that person maybe I'm not used to looking to them as a pastor, and they're not necessarily my pastor, but they become operationally my pastor while I'm there, especially regarding the work there, and that should be clear that that and there should be an agreement between my covering back home and this really new covering that I'm going to be serving under, and there is a blessing to me, and then of course my own believer priesthood. There's a few coverings um, God gives us. I also have, if you're married, you have the covering of your husband. Praise God. Yes. All right. And that's in 1 Corinthians 14. That wonderful little verse where it says, that women should ask their husbands at home what these things mean. And that is a great relationship on the mission field, and something to really keep it doctrinal. And we don't want to entertain, speech that's not doctrinal. We want my I want I want my husband. As a lady, I want my I want my spouse to be, you know, to be uh yeah, for our relationship to be one where, and actually she can also be a covering in some cases, right? In the case of Sarah, in the case of Abigail, when he wasn't thinking right, she had the mind of Christ, and there actually was a covering there. Then the body is a tremendous covering that I can get wisdom from the body. I think Pastor Shala touched on that, where there's there I can get help. Local, you know, maybe Hungarians might know a little bit about Hungary. And if I'm, proud and stuck up about it and I know everything, I will miss on that wisdom, and that maybe even a bit of protection that I could get from that covering that's there uh, in in the body. Um, Ephesians 1:22 and 23 says that the fullness of Christ is in the body. So missions is not something that is, we don't believe in independent anti-body missions, some kind of parachurch thing that's disconnected from a local assembly, because there's an amazing covering that is in the body. The pastor is a covering. Revelation chapter 1. There was a pastor for each church that was a messenger. 1 Timothy 5, verse 17. The pastor is a covering, and God will give him maybe wisdom, and that is for me. Why doesn't he give it to me? Well, he might, but he maybe just to test my humility. And this is how it is. This church planting is not a function of our natural, intellect, like planning a McDonald's somewhere, but it takes the wisdom from above that comes through humility, and for that God's going to give me coverings. And then, the Holy Spirit is a covering, Christ is a covering, the Word is a covering. So, huge, important principle here: getting wisdom and having a spiritual covering in everything that I do. And this is like really important. And there's an amazing protection there. Any questions about that? Having a covering on the mission field? And yeah. Sure. Why do all the good questions come from the women folk? Where are the guys? All right. Yeah. Say they're like, yeah. It's an authority that is there for my protection, to give wisdom, so that I'm not by myself, independent, there to solve my own problems by myself, really. And that's the beauty of a covering is that I don't have to handle everything myself. I can make it his problem. And that's awesome. That's actually what makes missions such a joy, really. And is that good? Say yes. All right, great. And of course we have Christ as a covering, right? He's praying for you. He's at the right hand of the Father, making intercession for you on the mission field. Prayer covering, enlisting people to pray for you. I do that more than I don't go for, and I don't ask anyone for $1 of support, but I go for the jugular when it comes for getting people to pray for me. I really believe in that, and that's an amazing covering to have. All right, then the second one is a spiritual walk. Having a spiritual walk, and I put and after Ephesians starts off with our position, where we are seated in heavenly places, who we are, Ephesians 1, Ephesians 2, Ephesians 3. He then starts to get into our walk, and this is maybe on the practical side of missions. Pastor Shallow really did great there in our schedule, that having a schedule can be a very spiritual thing. Proverbs 3:6 talks about committing your works to Him, and He orders your path. Committing your ways to Him. Proverbs 3:6. Proverbs 16:3. Committing your ways to Him, and He orders your thoughts. The preparation of the heart is in man, and the answer of the tongue is in the Lord. And I really believe in this. Having in my walk, having a planned schedule. We talked about that already. Um, Having a spiritual schedule. This is a little thing Pastor Shabeli did for some of our leaders in Africa. And if you look at it, this is how he kind of divided up his week. And if you look at it, there's probably 4 or 5 things there. One is prayer. We would have, a daily team meeting in the mornings where we'd listen to a tape from Baltimore and just pray together about 8 o'clock. And then pretty much every day there would be, maybe 5 times a week, there would be some kind of a evangelistic outreach. So prayer, evangelism, body life, and the word. Really, that could be a great way to have a spiritual schedule, a practical walk. And we're open to the sovereign will of God, changing things or whatever, but to have a planned, it's not doing it in the energy of the flesh, but it's also not doing it in the laziness of the flesh, right? But really having a, committing it to Him, asking Him to lead you, and having a spiritual covering that would lead you in a disciplined, non-sloppy, high, heavenly, holy schedule. And that, those are some great ingredients there: prayer, evangelism, body life, Bible. Isn't that great? Prayer, evangelism, body life, Bible, and free time. All right. This last trip we had this amazing schedule that was like perfectly, and the whole thing got blown out of the water every day, and so you're also, you're not stuck and like chained to your schedule, and you're available for God to, change it and intervene and detonate the whole thing as well. But the last thing you want when someone visits your country and they're all looking at you like, "What are we doing today?" and you don't have a clue what, just be led by God. Of course we want to be led by God, but in what? And the way I really enjoyed as a missionary, I came out of a very, we had a pattern here that had all these things in high dosages, and we were like flying at 100 miles an hour, and I really enjoyed landing on the mission field, and though there wasn't anything outwardly in terms of church and people or anything like that, we kind of landed in a very, we hit the ground running, and today we're having a team meeting, and after that we're evangelizing, and after that you got some free time, and tonight we're going to be teaching at the Bible in the hotel lobby, and tomorrow so that was a really great thing for me. I the idea of a bored missionary, I think, is, kind of like boring. Wouldn't it be just like Satan to get your you have to downgrade your walk to something less than the way God sees it, a high, a heavenly, and a holy calling, and you really do. And people are in the country for other reasons. They're there for, people that come to these countries for business and all these kind of things, and we've got a high and a heavenly and a holy calling, right? And my time is really important, and I don't want it to be, lost and disappear and wasted, and not something that's, like a hyper work system that's maybe not sustainable. Are we together? But you want to gauge the pace that you go at, and this is important. And then the last thing, let's turn to a spiritual war. This is another little practical here. A spiritual war. in first, in, let's say, 2 Corinthians 6, we've got a picture of the mission field that maybe is not very well advertised, and it's this little word in 2 Corinthians 6, verse 3. Giving no offense in anything that the ministry be not blamed, but in all things approving ourselves as ministers of God, in much patience, in afflictions, in necessities, in distresses, in stripes, imprisonments, in tumults, in labors, in watchings, in fastings, by pureness. And he, this is like a part, like God's plan for missions is to deposit messengers in a lot of stuff, and he's trusting that Christ is in you, Colossians 1 verse 27, and you're in heavenly places in Christ Jesus, in Ephesians 2:6, and now you're going to be in a lot of stuff, and and this is like something to maybe be aware of. Like trials are going to be like in a very real part, and we don't get into wrestling against flesh and blood. He talked about a team house and the benefits of a team house. My personal opinion is that a team house is a great place to land. There's going to be flesh, right? A bunch of there's going to be flesh, no matter which way you cut it. We don't want to talk about it, but where there are many oxen, there's a lot of increase, but there's a lot of stuff, that you're that you're in on the mission field. Yes, there will be, and this is normal, and I can just die to it and ask God to fill me, but we're gonna see it. There's demons. There's there's a world system that is intent on getting you distracted and getting your mind to be cleaving to the dust, and occasionally it will do. And in any war, there's going to be stuff, there's going to be ligaments, and sometimes it might be even from that wonderful teammate that's sitting right next to you in Bible college that has beautiful notebooks right now, but they're going to pull out their sword and they're going to chop off your ear or something like that on the mission field. And this is missions, and we can still have it is a war, and and should I end now or but really, I mean, it's true, and maybe you could be shocked, but it really, this is but I see Pastor Chaba nodding his head after 14 years on the mission field, and you'll be shocked when the guy who, Pastor Shallow came to Cyprus a few months ago, and we had this amazing conference, and there was a guy there who was just, just loving it and awesome. And I FaceTimed my dad a few months later, and he says, "You won't believe it. The guy's like, walking around the beachfront. He sees me, and he's like mumbling, he's swearing, 'Get off this island!'" The guy, and this is a spiritual warfare that we're part of. And I don't want to get into wrestling against flesh and blood, because it's not that guy. He's speaking from hell. And if I can and maybe the greatest advice we could have as a missionary is just learning the art of like standing. Like just standing, you've already won. Maybe I'm not even advancing, or but just staying where you are is like you're defying the enemy and the practical trials that will come. I remember walking out of a bank once just angry because my rent had just like almost tripled because the exchange rate went through the floor that month, and realizing that I don't want this to because the locals they have an amazing discernment, and they can tell when you're in the flesh. You can't actually hide it, and they can tell when there's maybe disunity on the team. They can tell that they're very discerning, and they're very perceptive, and this is we had a guy, we bought a piece of land and everything was going great, and we had a guy 2 properties down. We said, would you help us build? And he was a building contractor, and didn't really work out. And so, after the contract, we were shocked when he suddenly made himself like our ministry's enemy. Started like going to the council and claiming, that's my piece of land, and bribing council workers. And the key is really just to stand and not to wrestle against flesh and blood, not to let it distract you so that your schedule starts to be clogged up with administrative details that are taking my mind away from really what I'm there to do. Because at the end of the day, I'm there to deposit what I have in Christ, what Christ has given to me in people. And this is, you know, yeah. Should we end on a really high note? Just describe what malaria is like. I remember in my first year, flying 100. This is amazing, and we planted like a second church, and everyone was going really great, and and Pastor, yeah, this is a good little spot to end. Pastor Ronaldo had this habit. He didn't like, you know, mosquitoes and stuff like that. So he had this habit of keeping the uh, the the team house, locked up with, all the windows closed permanently, so the heat would come in and it would just get hotter and hotter. And I have like a problem with heat. I don't know why I was called to Africa, but uh, I remember it would get so hot. Sometimes I would put a a wet towel on me. I remember one night, waking up and this wet towel had become this leather. It was like a mummy lying there. There's Joe Roach snoring in the next bed, and there's this piece of leather, this towel, and I'm like, what is wrong with him? Run to the door, open the door, went out, lay on the grass. It was a little bit of cool, refreshing air outside, and then all of a sudden I hear this mosquito, and I know they're malaria mosquitoes. Then eventually I got it, and I remember going outside, and it's hot as anything outside, but I'm freezing and I'm shaking, and then I got diarrhea, and then I got throwing up, and all these crazy things. And this is missions. Welcome to mission. It's amazing. I mean, it's incredible. Dal, you're gonna love it. And but yeah, and I realized you can't be hyper spiritual about this and just don't get bit. And but and this is the beauty of it, isn't it? And Paul actually says it, in distress and in shipments and in a night and a day in the deep, and in it, like Christ is in missions, and Christ is in all the stuff. and and really, we can war a good warfare, right? When our mind is not cleaving to the dust, but we're setting our mind on things above, and learning not to allow that to poison your spirit, right? We don't overcome we're not overcome by evil, but we overcome evil, with good. Because at the end of the day, people there have been living there in that part of the world system their whole life, and they're not looking for, just another better person. They're looking for something not natural, and that's that's the new man. That's Christ. And do you think Christ had all this stuff? He did, right? He did constantly. And this is the beauty of it. People are not looking for perfection in your flesh. They're looking for, a perfect Christ in all this stuff. And in all these things, we're more than conquerors, right? In all these things, we're more than conquerors. And we come back and we have stories, and we kind of forget about all the stuff, right? And those team members that we were in the wars together, and we had, scars together. Maybe we even stabbed each other a few times together, but we come back, with with uh, with trophies, and we met God, in it. So, any questions on the practical side of missions? I remember one time praying with my wife. I just moved there. I hadn't had a visa for 5 years. And for 5 years, I was applying for a 2-year visa. And they were denying and denying and denying. And eventually, the woman who had denied me my visa, she came to our church. And I was preaching my heart out. Pastor Ronaldo was out at the time. And there was this woman who would not look at me in the service. And I'm having a good time. And I even mentioned the visa issue. And this woman's just looking down the whole time. Big, fat woman. And I from all the bribery in government offices. And then all of a sudden afterwards, this woman comes up to me and apologizes to me like, I am so sorry. I'm like, what? And then I recognize her from the meeting that we had with her. And she says, I approved everyone else, but you had a South African passport, and I broke up with this boyfriend from South Africa, and I just took it out on you. I'm like, oh my gosh, you're the cause of the. I said, don't worry, it is God. The whole thing's God. And I left the country, and then as I was leaving the country, Pastor Enoch, who was like our visa guy, he calls me. He says, "You can't come back. It's over. They've told you you cannot come back." And I said, "Whatever." So he gave me time to get married, and I got married, and then had a few months here, and then Melinda and I went back. So I stamped in on a different passport, my British passport. And, so I'm thinking, oh, this is great. God, this is awesome. And the application gets postponed. We're supposed to have a decision by Friday, and then they postponed it. So I'm waiting and waiting. And we're all living in Sophie's house, Sophie Petridis' house, waiting for this visa application to come through. And another week goes by, and another week goes by, and then I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I'm a bad husband here. I got my wife cooped up in a little one room of Sophie's house, and eventually, I said, God, this is ridiculous. I don't know. I lost it. For 5 years, I'd been fine as a single guy, but newly married, I said, I can't do this to my wife. I'm walking down the street, and I'm like, God, if you don't give me a visa, I'm out of here. I'm done with this place. And so we went into the immigration, and we're outside the head of immigration. I asked someone, I said, can I see the head of immigration? She said, he happens to be in the city right now. Go ahead. She gives me my file, and in my they've got the old file with the with the previous passport's application and all this stuff, and so I start perusing through it, and I find the spot where the woman had rejected it. And she said the guy looks so poor and shabby that he'd probably be using money from Zambians in order to live here. That was like my first year there. I don't know what. So I said to the guy, like, I've never taken money from Zambians. Come on, And he started talking to me, and he had been to Britain. I'd never lived there for more than a year, and he liked me, and he wrote a little note, and the whole thing was over, And I just realized, all these things are for our sake, and finding Christ in the war is the key, And I'd rather be out there smelling like sheep, dirty as heck, with a couple of scars and a whole bunch of stories, than living in a nice, clean, cookie-cutter, powerless, fruitless, boring, domesticated, backslidden lifestyle that's so comfortable that it makes the angels puke. As Pastor Shallow said one day, let's get to heaven on a dune buggy, right? What is a dune buggy? One of those. And it's awesome. All right. Any questions?
Pick a city, write it on a piece of paper, write a few notes on it, and really do something. Write up a little paper on it. What is the plan? And just do it as an exercise and think about it. And you don't know all the answers to it, but why not do a practice run? You don't know all the answers, but guess. Just make something up. Think about it, read about it, and have some plan. Okay, Pastor Adam, should they turn it in? Do you think it'd be good to turn it in? Pastor Adam has decided that you should be turning it in.